I would like to, and I know that Yahuah is already drawing the lilies of the valley over our way. I know that the lilies of the field and those among thorns are being drawn, to blossom along with us in such a time that we live in now. And I know sometimes it doesn't seem like that, but we are going to trust in the name of our Yahushua HaMashiach, the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. Together we will do this. We will draw souls that love and long after our Yahuah, our delight, his son Yahushua, and the beauty of instructions, right? And this, we are really, the purpose or the intent behind this is to introspect what's our spirit, our soul, and our body, how it is designed by Yahuah to be in harmony, and how we are designed for love. And because in our fallen state, we are to follow his Torah. That's okay. We are to love Yahuah with all our heart, our soul, and our mind. And so really, this ministry is about the ministry of reconciliation. For us first to realize that we have been made perfectly by Yahuah, made in his image, in the likeness of him. And because we are made that way, we are called to bring his reign, his desire, his will on earth as it is in heaven. So tonight, we, on a personal note and in this collective manner, we will continue our discussion. And if you've noticed, I've been chipping away from the overcomer promise in Revelation 2 and 3. And so what you have there on the screen, I think I'm sharing it, is Revelation 3. Revelation 3:21. We sort of chipped away from that last Tuesday, but then there is so much to this verse. And so I'm just going to say it here, Revelation 3:21. To him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. So this is a quote from our Yahushua. This is his promise to the overcomer, to the Laodicean church, right? In Revelation 3:14. And this is Laodicean is the seventh of the seventh assembly mentioned in Revelation 2 and 3. And Laodicean church is known to be the lukewarm church, right? Lukewarm because Yahushua says, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you could be cold or hot, but then because you're lukewarm, I will vomit you out of my mouth. I will spew you out of my mouth. So, and he gives the qualification. What does lukewarmness kind of look like? So he says, because you say in verse 17, I am rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing. Look at that. And if you really, truly, if we're honest with ourselves, this fits the category, like all of that fits where we are today. And we don't know that we are actually wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked, right? So I'm looking at this, and I'd like to really take us now back to the Genesis story, right? This overcomer promise is specifically talking about throne, about dominion, whether we see it or not at this time. But so what is that like? So I think we are going to, and I think you'll be quite surprised to see that the overcomer promises in Revelation 2 and 3, you can actually look back to Genesis, to the early chapters of Genesis, and you can see it there, okay? So why, you wonder, why are we going back to Genesis creation? And I even asked this myself. because a lot of my recent studies have Yahuah has always drawn me to this first few chapters of Genesis, and I'll explain why. Okay, so and you have to also I come from a background where, you know, I have a sincere desire. I'm hungry for Yahweh's word. So when I'm studying, I'm very sensitive to the Ruach's leading. And as I was sharing with Sister Yosana earlier, I don't just stick with one teacher. You know, I do have various literature and various teachers that I consider and that I listen and watch, right? But what's amazing to me is even now, as I'm, you know, as I'm taking this brain story certification, that is not really scripture based. It's very much science based, right? But even in that, I see the Ruach's guiding, right? I see, and I will share that as we expand a little bit more in our topic. But why the Genesis story? See, the Genesis creation story is, let's think of it as the core story, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has the underlying foundation that really helps simplify and address core issues, and not just core issues. And when I say core issues, we're talking about the big questions in life. And so it addresses that in a simplified manner. And from there, you know, you branch off. You can branch off to many various branches, right? So big questions
Mm-hmm.
like, who am I? You've heard this before. Where did I come from? Why am I here? And what happens after life? And you know what, from that core story, and this is what Yahuah has revealed, or that I'm seeing in the scripture, you can, from that story, you can branch off and take it to relationships. You can take it to health, wealth, Israel, Gentiles, the church or assemblies. From their eschatology, there's prophecy in there. There's the study of angels, angelology, you know, science, even astrology. So in the Genesis, in this core story, there is a common set of elements. And this common set of elements, they're organized in such a way that it's a story, right? And it's such a, you know, it's the way it's organized is generalized. I recognize that, right? And the story I see, it includes time and outside of time. We have to recognize that. You recognize that when it comes to creation, there's really not a lot of content, right, in the scriptures about it. We know that, right? You know, it's referenced less than 40 times in the scripture. You can do a survey and you'll see, obviously, in Genesis, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Prophet Amos. These prophets refer to the context of creation, and Psalms. There, it's all over Psalms. And Paul spoke of the beginning, and Luke as well referred to the Genesis account in Acts, and James also, right? So you wonder, why is it? Why is there a lack of specifications and details? And, you know, it seems, I'm seeing that it seems that the Genesis story is written intentionally that way. Why? I am seeing that it is, you know, Yahweh wrote it in a way to open something within us, you know, because there's layers and various ways to read Genesis. And I know you kind of don't know what I'm talking about until we get down to some of it. But the point I'm saying is, it's a, you know, there's two sides of the creation story, right? There's one that is too simple, right? It's oversimplified, and you know, the Genesis story is usually dealt with in the Sunday school material type, right? and it's taught to children, and it makes sense, right? And the other side of that is that the creation story could be too controversial, because there are some, I have come across different writers or books that have been written from that context, from that content, and they're really, touching a lot of things that, that might be too controversial to the general, to the normal Christian, I guess you would say. So the question is, why would we even bother then, right? Why do we look at this story when there are many so-called, like issues that is at hand? So we have the Torah, right? We're in the season, we're in the fall feasts. We have, we're studying, or we're looking, some of us are looking into the Hebraic roots of our faith. We're dealing with salvation, deliverance, spiritual attacks, community, the end time. So why is it, and these things are real, right? And we obviously need to be involved in these areas. But at the same time, I don't know if it's just me or if you're noticing the same thing, but in the areas that I just mentioned, there are many divisions in the body of Mashiach at present. Do you agree with me? In the areas that are, right? When it comes to these issues, there are divisions. And when there's divisions, see what's happening. Yahuah has called us to have one vision. And when there is a division, you see, there's a division, right? So you can't help but introduce confusion in the mix, right? So, and all I'm saying all that just to prepare us, just to see what we're dealing with, okay? So the creation story, the reason why I kind of want to park here for the next little while is I see it as a core or a means of communication where we can bring people together, gifted in different areas of the ministries, right? And these different people who don't typically, link up or speak to each other. Like you won't, I don't know, Sister Yusana, do you see, like, for example, Russ Dizdar? Russ Dizdar speak to someone like Matthew Nolan, right? Like you don't really see them, and I'm not saying that they can't, but what I'm seeing is it's just that it seems that there are different. Oh, I know that there are different areas of ministries, but I'm seeing a little bit where this story in Genesis can sort of be a platform where it can serve as a core, right? Because no matter how you look at it, the Genesis account has all the principles of first mention, right? So the creation story can speak to anyone, really, no matter who you are, what nation you are from, whether you are, a New Testament only believer, or, you're a what would you call it, messianic, right? Whether you are, do you see what I'm trying to express here? That even outside church, think of relationship, health, wealth, right? All of these things, you go back, you can start a conversation with someone and say, you know what, we all started somewhere, like Yahoo, we were all created, and you can draw them back, right, to the creation story. And almost like a childlike faith, we can approach them. So, but we have to see the beauty of this text, right? The beauty of it. Let me just, so just some of the things that, actually, I don't know if I'm sharing my, let me just share my screen.
Like the 144,000 that are going to come, they are going to speak the same thing. They are going to present the gospel.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And there are 144,000.
Yes.
the 12 tribes.
Yes. Oh, no, that's another thing that, oh man, there's so much to talk about when it comes to that. That's amazing. The study of who the 144,000 is. But here's just some things that I want to, right at the front, right on the onset, I want to bring to your attention. These are some of the things that I am seeing in Genesis 1 and 3. I've been stuck here because and I'm not saying I'm just parked here. You know, I'm taking the whole counsel of Yahuah and basically just knitting it back to Genesis 1. Okay. In the Genesis story, right? And so obviously in this account, you're going to see the all sufficiency, all powerful, all knowing, all ruling, all loving, all in all Yahuah, our Elohim. Yeah. In Genesis, you're going to see Yahushua, the light of the world. Like, you'll see him. He's all over, right? Redemption, word, right? In the Genesis account, I see our biology there, right? Our spirit, soul, body. I even see the tabernacle of Moshe in there, right? And just a quick mention, when I ended up connecting with a doctor all the way from Budapest. Where's Budapest? Is that in Romania? No.
Hungary.
Hungary, right? Hungary. And I had about almost an hour conversation with him. And his name, I can't remember at the moment. But and the reason why we connected was this doctor is very interested in the scripture. And he is a doctor, and when he does his lecture in California or in Budapest, he will refer to the scripture to use it as a reference to what he's teaching. So that to me was amazing, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, I'm seeing a lot of creation, like in the first few chapters of Genesis, science is all over it. And he's talking about biology, cellular activity. He's talking like that. And in the little bit of understanding that I've gathered, I will point some of that to you when we go through it. Okay. I see that there are two creation stories, and I've mentioned that in the past. And something I'm going to say that's quite controversial, and we're actually going to, I've already asked Rish or Rihanna, whoever is going to do it. But what we're going to do a little bit of an exercise, and I'm simply going to read the first chapter of Genesis, and we will just take it face value. And one of the girls is going to draw it for us right on the screen. And you'll be quite surprised as to what you're going to see when when you read the creation account, the creation story, and you simply take a child's understanding and you say, this is there, on day one, whatever, right? We're going to see that. I was planning on doing that tonight, but I told Rish we'll do it for next week probably. I see in the first chapters of Genesis the holy Yahuah set apart people, the set apart city. I see Jerusalem. I see Melchizedek. I see, the Melchizedek, the Jerusalem versus the Gentiles, the nations. I see the book of covenant and book of law in there. Torah's, the Yahuah's loving instructions. And you know what? I even see Nephilim in there, the mixing of seed between fallen beings and man. See, I'm just putting that all on the surface, right? And the reason why I mention these things just to let you know that based on what I'm seeing, and the study can grow into various branches, right? But we need to stay on track for the purpose of why we have come together here and why we have come together in the first place. Because really, we have been studying the architecture of man, right? Spirit, soul, body. And how we have paralleled this to how our brain is also composed of, made composition of our brain. and how we link the brain composition to the triune man by the story of Adam, Eve, and the serpent. We've done that in our past sessions. And so we have some understanding as to why we do, why we're doing what we're doing. And we know that, when Paul talks about this battle, right, between flesh and spirit, and what it means to walk in the spirit, like this is part of the reason why we're doing these studies. What does it mean to walk in the spirit so that we do not fulfill the lust of the flesh, right? So we've taken quite an extensive look at these topics. We've taken, we've talked about some scientific terms and some processes and things like that, but we made sure to really stick to what the scripture is saying. Okay, so one thing though that I want to mention, I mentioned it earlier. Why is it that there's such little reference to the creation story? And you're going to notice that the 66 books of the scripture, most of it, if you really take the time to ponder it, most of it speaks to sanctification. Do you guys see that in the scripture? Right?
Yeah.
Right? The scripture, you've heard other ministers or teachers say that, the scripture is written for people who are already redeemed. Yes, in the church, like a lot of times they'll go and they'll do the door-to-door knocking, and they'll they refer to it as the Romans road to salvation or something. They'll and I'm not saying that Yahuah can't use those materials, but when we're talking Romans, that is a very much a sanctification book, right? So can you imagine a person who has not really come to faith, like genuine faith yet, and now you're dealing with what Paul is talking about in Romans, right? So you're going to see that most of what Paul wrote in the New Testament, these are dealing with, our current walk as a child of Yahuah, right? And this we know. So there's the 3 stages of salvation. We know that. We have the justification, we have the sanctification, and then we have the glorification, right? You've heard this.
Yes.
So justification, just as if when you come to the saving knowledge, faith of the finished work of Yahushua HaMashiach, washed and cleansed by the blood of Yahushua HaMashiach, then you are cleansed, forgiven, just as if you didn't sin. Right? But that's just the beginning of the walk. Now you have to deal with this big soul, this old soul that we have. Right? And that soul is going to take a lifetime. It's going, and that's why it's called sanctification. This is so justification, we have been saved from the penalty of sin, right? Sanctification, we have been saved from the power of sin. Huge difference. That's what we've been talking about in the last, I don't even know how many months now. The reason why we're breaking apart spirit, soul, body, and even using a very scientific proven concept of the way our brain is made up, because we can parallel it to how our spirit, soul, and body works, right? This is sanctification. And when you have understanding of this, when you before you can change, before you can introduce solutions, you have to know what the problem is, right? So what's happening is we immerse our brain into problems. I want you to think about that. Think about your thought life for a second. We immerse our brain into problems as opposed to immersing our brain into solutions, right? Right?
Yeah, so, I heard once a joke. This man did a bad thing, and he get in front of the judge, and the judge asked, why did he do that? And he said, well, it wasn't me. See, I have two natures. I have a bad nature and a good nature. And the bad nature did that. So the judge said, oh, that's okay. I'm going to put you both in prison and you sort it out. It's a joke, but when you think of it, yes. The good nature should control the bad nature.
There you go.
Because if we don't control it, we end up where we don't like,
Yep. We do have one body right now. and inside this one body, this is what we need to understand. There's division happening inside us. There's division. And we can see, this in the Genesis story, right? And so we talked about the sanctification. Now, one day, and this is the blessed hope that we all look forward to. This is the glorification, right? So this is that we ultimately, one day, we will be saved from the presence of sin. Presence. Because we cannot deny the fact that Romans, and Paul speaks about it in Romans, I see a law of sin in my members, right? So we are being saved here, but one day we will be saved from the very presence of sin because we will be changed. In a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, we will change. This corruptible flesh will be changed into something that's incorruptible, right? So this is the reason why I just want to explain to you why are we even bothering going back to Genesis, right? So here's the other thing too that I think is beautiful. I think this is like a recent, I thought at first I only saw a few, but now, the overcomer promises of the overcomer in Revelation. Do you agree with me that we are called to be an overcomer, especially in today's day and age, in the day that we live now?
Certainly.
Absolutely. We have to understand what it means, not just understand, but overstand what that means to be an overcomer. So if you look at the promises of overcomer in Revelation 2 and 3, and I've named them here, okay? And so,
excuse me.
Sure. I'm gonna just, hold on a second. There we go, Usana. I'm gonna, yeah. All right. So the in Revelation 2 and 3, if what I wanted to bring to your attention is these overcomer promise that I'm going to talk about. What if I told you that we can actually find these from the first books of Genesis? And it just makes sense because Revelation really is the reversal of the beginning, right? So, in Genesis is where the beginning of everything happened. And in Revelation, we see, the story started off in the tree and it ends up in the tree, right? The story, you're going to see the tree of life in Revelation. You see it in the beginning, right? So certain promises like this, the overcomer promise to the church, or I'm going to use the word assembly, to the assembly in Ephesus. And Sister Yusana, feel free to unmute yourself when you feel like it. Okay. So Ephesus is another term for the Ephesus in the Greek. Etymology of it is darling, right? So you see the relationship. Each of the 7 churches or the 7 assemblies in Revelation, there is a reason why Yahushua chose these 7 assemblies. There is a specific reason, even in the name of these assemblies. So the promise to the Ephesus or darling is what? I will give to eat from the tree of life, Remember, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, which is in the midst of the paradise of Yah, right? Now, there's an overcomer promise to the assembly in Smyrna. Smyrna is known to be the poor and the persecuted church. And the promise to Smyrna is they will not be hurt by the second death. Overcomer promise to Pergamo. Pergamos is known as the compromised church. And for them, the overcomer promises, I will give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written which no one knows except him who receives it. And I can tell you, we can see that from the Genesis as well. Okay, overcomer promise to Thyatira, I will give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and they shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessels, as I also have received from my Father. Overcomer promise to Sardis. This church, if you really read the description of this church, you can simplify it and call them the Walking Dead church. And the promise to them, if they overcome, is that they will be clothed in white garments, and their names will not be blotted out in the book of life, and they will be confessed by Yahushua before our Father and before the angels, right? Overcomer to the Philadelphia church. Okay, this church. Everybody wants to be this church. It's the brotherly love church. It's the fellowship church, and it is one of the two out of the seven that Yahushua does not give a condemnation for. Okay, so think of the 7 letters to the 7 assemblies as a report card, right? All 7 churches or assemblies are given a good report and a bad report. And based on that, there is an overcomer promise. And there is also if you don't change, this is what's going to happen to you. That's what I mean. So overcomer promise to Philadelphia, this particular church, this is one. And the other one, I believe, is Smyrna.
Smyrna.
Yeah, Smyrna. Right, Smyrna. Philadelphia there's no condemnation in this particular church. So that's something to pay attention to. But even in this one, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my Yah, and he shall go out no more, and I will write on him the name of my Yah, and the name of the city of my Yah, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my Yah, right? So, again, it's subtle there. It's subtly written in the Genesis. You're going to have to see it. And then the last one that we just read earlier is the overcomer promise to Laodicean, okay? The lukewarm church. So going back to what I was saying earlier, why is it that there isn't so much written when it comes to the Genesis story? And this is my educated answer for that. And this educated answer is very open to change. Just so you know, okay? I am willing to change my position as Yahuah reveals things to me as always. But this is what Yahuah has revealed to me, and I think it's pretty amazing, okay? As I mentioned earlier, the scripture, most of it, a high percentage of it, the scripture says that in the volume of the book is written of Yahushua. Yahushua is our salvation, right? It's for sanctification. But the reason why in Genesis, and there's only a few in the rest of the scripture, it talks about the creation story, it talks about Adam and Eve, it talks about what it was like in the beginning, is because we're dealing with spirit level here. Do you see where I'm coming from? If the scripture says that the law of Yahuah is perfect, right? It is for the converting of the soul. Think of what that's saying. That's in Psalm 19 or Psalm 119, right? The law is for the converting of the soul. And we understand, based on our past studies, how much our soul needs conversion. Do you agree?
Yes.
This old soul is very powerful. And, even in the science of the brain, we know that our conscious mind can only do 2,000 actions per second. 2,000 actions per second. is the way our mind processes information. But our non-conscious, our subconscious realm is what was it? Oh, it's 2000 versus 40 billion
Wow.
actions per second. So, do you see why we need a lot of work? And now, do you see why the scripture mostly is for sanctification? Because we need it. So, what I'm saying is, because we live in such a time that we live now, and you know what? There are a plethora of teachings on YouTube videos that talk about sanctification and talk about Israel, that talks about book of the law, book of covenant, and the Torah, all of these things. You know, that's they have been called to share that. So for me, what I'm seeing is, you know what? Yahuwah says, I seek those who will worship me in spirit and in truth. So why is it that Genesis account is so little? It's because Yahuwah is ministering to us in such a way that is its spirit level, right? It's in us, we are dealing with something that is spirit and a spiritual level. And I know that might sound like, okay, sure, let's see how that goes, right? But we are going to read, we're going to read the Genesis account now, okay? And let me just go to, I thought I had it up on my screen, but that's fine. I can quickly pull it up. So now we're going to start with the Genesis chapter 1:1. Okay? Yes. All right. So if you have your scripture, or you can simply look at the screen. Okay. In the beginning, Yahuwah, or Elohim, we should say, because that's Elohim,
Mhm.
created the heavens and the earth. Okay. In that one sentence, you can spend a lot of time unpacking and explaining and expressing what that means. And we're not going to do that because there's a lot of teachings out there that does that. But one thing that I'm going to say about Genesis 1:1 is this. If we don't wake up in the morning and acknowledge and be, I don't even know, be grateful, be absolutely grateful, and declare that Yahuwah Elohim is the author of creation, right? And that doesn't amaze us each morning, the fact that we are up, that we have awoken to the land of the living, and we can behold the beauty of the heaven, the heaven that we see here, and earth, right? In other words, the fact that this is written here, right, this should be enough for us to motivate us, to encourage us, to get us excited each and every morning, even though we don't feel like it. Because in beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth, and that includes us, right? And the fact that he is the creator, right? See, he is the creator. That means he gets to put rules because he's the creator, right? So there's
Mhm.
rules, and we just need to accept that, right? And we need to accept that there is a part of us, and not just part of us, but even in the society, in the culture, in the environment that we live in, they are very much in rebellion when it comes to this, right? They choose to ignore that there is a creator, right? And they choose to worship the created rather than the creator, right? So,
Yeah.
right, so that we're all clear, right? And we know that heavens is in plural form, right? Okay. So verse 2, the earth became or was without form and void. Okay. And darkness was on the face of the deep. Okay. Now, So, you know, that is this particular verse. There are controversial things that you'll find on how this is interpreted, but we're not going to go there tonight. But one thing I want to note here is that, you know, the very next few verses says, and the spirit of Elohim was hovering over the face of the waters. The spirit of Elohim was hovering over the face of the waters. Hovering, if you look up what that is, right? If you do a deep word search of what that is, it's almost like a mother-like care, just like brooding over the face of the waters. It's like the Ruach HaKodesh is so deeply concerned and is looking intently, brooding, or, you know, like over the face of the waters. There's, in other words, there's deep care. And at the same time, there's deep concern that this is implying. Okay. But one thing that we notice right away in verse 3 is then Elohim said, let there be light. And there was light. Okay. So let there be light, and there was light. So we know that in verse 2 that the Ruach HaKodesh is brooding or hovering over the face of the waters. So there's already waters present. You notice that, right? We didn't see anywhere that says, let there be waters, right? So one of the things we first notice, there's already water in there, okay? And the breath, the ruach of Elohim was upon it, or the frequency. I want you to see, because the breath, word, right? Word, the breath, the ruach, energy, right? Is countering or is interacting with water. And the next thing we see is light. And I know I've referred to this in the past, but I'm going to show you an experiment of what happens when you add sound to water. You guys can see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Called sonoluminescence.
The first time I saw sonoluminescence was in a darkened room. I was transfixed to look at this spherical flask of fluid, and you'd look into the center, and in the center see a glowing blue-purple light, which could be seen with the unaided eye. It looked like a star in the heavens.
Seth Putterman called it the star in a jar, a tiny spot of bright light contained in a flask of liquid. This star in a jar is made when a sound wave is passed through a small bubble inside a flask of liquid. And this sound wave makes the bubble do something remarkable. First it expands, then it collapses. And this collapse happens so violently that vapor molecules trapped inside the bubble slam together and heat up so much that the bubble gives off an incredible burst of heat and light, several thousand times a second, giving the appearance of a star.
So I share the science behind it because where's my scripture? Right, here we go. We know that everything was made by the word, by the spoken word of Yahuah, right? So the spoken word, we know anytime you speak, there is a flow of energy that is released, right? So you can see that even in the early text of Genesis, there's already science that sparks that's written right in the first few verses of Genesis, right? And one thing that we also, and I also want to acknowledge, right, is that when we are dealing with prior to the fall, right, before the fall, we really we can make our best educated guesses, and we can make our best parallel, we can parallel it with science, but we really have no clue, right? In other words, this is, beyond our imagination, right? And yet at the same time, it doesn't limit us to imagine. So we can think, we can imagine what it's like, what it was like. But then we need to make sure that we wove it, we line it up with the written word, with the whole counsel of Yahuah, right? So, and so the point here is that in the beginning, right, was the word, right? And the word was Yah, Elohim, and let me see, and the word was with
Was.
Elohim, and the word was Yah, yes, right? So, and what you're gonna notice is from this spark of light, everything else has been created, everything else. So the very first thing is the light after the Ruach, the Spirit of Yahuah, is hovering over the face of the waters, right? And then what the other thing too that that I wanted to point out is that I've seen some written things about the first verse 2 and verse 3, and some writers or some people who do some research, they see here um, the conception, the origin of life. Okay, so I think of I don't know if you've seen a video of egg fertilization, right? So anyway, you're gonna see that when a sperm goes through the process out of 300 million sperms, and it ends up finding and ends up surviving the very harsh conditions that it has to go through before it can, one out of 300 million ends up getting into an egg. But what I wanted to say is that when conception happens, right? I've talked about this in the past. They have been able to capture, they've been able to take a picture of what happens moments after conception. Okay, so what happens is there is this great light that sparks as well, and they were able to take pictures of this. They were able to take like videos of it, slow motion videos of it. And so you can see that even at the very, very start of life in a mother's womb, right, there's a tiny molecular fireworks, or a ball of light that that is seen, right? Again, this is life. And that's why in John 1, right? Let's go to John 1 so that I don't misquote it. You're going to see in John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was in the beginning with Elohim, and all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. Look at this. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. See? So light and life, I think mom one day, she's like, oh, wow, look at this, light and life. They're almost synonymous. Yes, right? Life and light, right? In life, there is light, right? So we have to see that the beauty of that. Okay, so moving on to verse 4. And Elohim saw the light that it was good. Okay, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. Okay, and it says Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. So I've been doing studies in the brain research, okay, or brain study. And one of the things that really amazed me was how fetal development takes place, or how babies develop, right, at conception. And one of the things that happens first is one of the things that develops first is the brain, our brain, right? And the way it works is it starts off with a single cell, right? And what happens is the cells start to what? Divide, right? So there's this cell division, and we know when cells divide, they need to divide to grow, right? And what happens is there is a separation that takes place. This is called the neural tube, okay? In the neural tube process, this is, I think, from 0 to 24 days in the mother's womb, okay, in the development of a child in the mother's womb. So there's a division that takes place, and that division ends up, there is um, a top division and a bottom division. And what happens is the cells that are stuck at the top, they develop into what we call the neocortex, the paleocortex, and the bottom part of the brain. And the brain, or the cells that are at the bottom, you can see that it's attached, and it turns into like a spinal cord. And from there, everything else develops. It's so amazing. But the point I'm saying is, in the very onset of the scripture, there's already a division. Okay. And if you think about it, light, right? Light is divided from darkness. Okay. Now, light speaks of day, right? Speaks of consciousness, awareness, right? Darkness, it implies darkness, right? So, but right from the very, onset, you're going to see, and where does our higher thinking generate from? It's from the top part of us, from our brain, right? And the rest of our bodies, the bottom part of us, really acts out the instructions that are sent by our brain, right? So that's why they call it auto something. I can't remember the term, but it's like an autopilot, right? So it will do, the reason why I can move my hands is because my brain is telling me to move my hands, right? So that's where I'm coming from, right? So let's move on here. Then Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And this is kind of where the drawing that I want to do with Rish and Rihanna to take place. Because when I start reading the first chapter of Genesis, and a child draws it, you're going to be so amazed at how it looks like in the end. But you're going to see that there is a firmament that Yahuah made. A firm. So if it's a firmament, that means it's firm, right? Impenetrable, right? Firmament, look at this, in the middle of the waters. So let it divide the waters from the waters. And Yahuah made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. So let's think for a second, okay? Why is it when you look at the sky, why is it color blue? Humor me. They say, this was before, they say, oh, it's because the sky is blue because it's reflecting off of the water. Yes, there's a huge component of water on the earth. I get that. But what about when in the desert? What about now? I'm looking at, on the streets. I don't see any water, and yet the sky is blue.
Yeah, in Arizona, it's the bluest sky in the whole place. I never seen a blue sky like in Arizona.
Right, and wow, and maybe because you've been to Arizona?
Yes.
Wow, I want to go there. There's some beautiful scenery there. But I think it's because you are the positioning, the topology of where you're at, and maybe it's clear skies, or there's not a lot of what do you call them, chemtrails or whatever. So maybe that's
No,
why.
well, I went there a few years back when we didn't hear about chemtrails. It was like, I don't know,
Ah,
maybe 20 years or so
oh,
ago.
ago. But you know what? It dates back then. I have heard some stories where it's a pretty old. It's nothing new. Now people are aware of chemtrails, but what I'm saying is we have to see that, is it perhaps, does it make sense? Does it make sense that when in the stories of Noah, in the story of Noah, the scripture says the windows of heaven opened?
Mhm.
And what, when the windows of heaven water and windows of heaven open, if you read it, you are going to see that water came down. Do you think that the earth was flooded just by raining? Right? The scripture says the fountains of the deep broke open. And so remember that there's water all over the place, right? There's what's in verse 2, there's the deep, there's the face of the deep, right? There's darkness was on the face of the deep. So even in that, what deep is that? Right? Like, you gotta, this is what I mean when, you gotta ask these questions, because when you ask these questions, I can tell you the Ruach will give you some understanding of it. And what happens is, if you kind of tuck it away and, or and then maybe share it when the time comes. But like all of these questions, we kind of read over Genesis so quickly, or maybe because a lot of the materials we have is from Sunday school, that we were taught this, right? But there's waters above the firmament, right? Which is, we know that that's heaven. So now, if you want to do this, if you want to go to YouTube and look for, and I'll see if I can find it, but if you look at um, uh, stars, right? If you look at stars, um, images of stars, if you kind of, you zoom in on them, and you kind of notice that for a second, just you're going to see it's kind of shimmering, it's kind of moving, it's kind of dancing, right? And then in the same video, the guy, what he did was he put light in distilled water, in a pool of distilled water, and he put light in the pool, and you're going to see yourself that the way, the movement of that light, the way that light is twinkling, is sparkling, of movement, it's very much the same as the star that's being zoomed in. And you look at the star, the movement, it's like almost the same thing. You can't tell the difference. So could it be that the stars that we see, the reason why they move the way they do, they twinkle, and and yeah, some of them they fall or whatever. And that's another story. But could be that they are like that because they're surrounded by waters, right? So some of the things that we have to ask. So now, if we go to verse 8, okay. So now day 1, we see that there was already light. So there was light, okay. And day 2 was when the firmament was established. So when the heavens were kind of established, right? And then in verse 9, right, we're going to see, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Okay. So first of all, we want to take note that light was already made, or light, there's already light in day 1 of creation. So where is the sun and the moon made? When we know that the sun, the moon, and the stars were not made until later, right? I just want to point that out, okay? So now there is the division, waters above the firmament and below, Okay, and now Yahweh's now he's talking in the creation part on day 3. He's now letting dry land appear. Okay, and it was so. Okay, from the dry land, he calls that earth. Okay, and so there is a gathering of waters, and the dry land appearing is earth, and the waters that are below the firmament he calls seas. Seas, S-E-A-S, and God and Yahuah saw that it was good. Okay, so one thing that I want to point out here, okay, is that everything that we have seen so far is made from water, right? From the interaction of the word or spoken word and light. Okay, and if you look at our biology, our makeup, okay, you have 2 systems that run all over our body. Okay, one is where the blood flows. I think it's called the arteries, or so there's the arteries. This is where the blood is transported, right? I forget the term, but
There
there's
is arteries and there are veins.
yes, and right next
the
to
artery,
that, what is that
yeah,
called? Where the anyway, I can't remember the term right now, but
lymphatic
so
system.
that's the next point. The lymphatic is separate from where the blood flows.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two highways that flow through our bodies. There is the one highway, and it transports the blood, right? And there is one highway that transports the lymph, or that's the lymphatic system, and that is basically water. It's clear water, or in other words, white blood cells, they call it, right? So these two, they run all over our body. And the way it works is they basically transport nutrients, and the lymphatic, its job is to transport, I'm just using simple terms that we can all understand. The lymphatic, yes, it is pure liquid or clear liquid, but it's really white blood cells. But what it's really doing is it's transporting light, giving each and every cells that we have inside our body. We have 50 trillion cells, 50 to 70 trillion cells in our bodies. And each and every cell is getting a perfect serving of nutrients from the blood, and it's also getting detoxed, or anything that needs to be cleansed. That's what the blood is doing. And at the same time, it's also getting a perfect serving of light. Okay, but for that flow to happen, right, for that to be uninterrupted, it needs to be uninterrupted for it to not have any stagnation or inflammation or interruption. But the cells, okay, the cells right next to it needs to be kept dry, in other words. So I guess what I'm saying is, I see, when I was talking to that doctor, I didn't have time to ask him, can you expound? What do you mean? What do you mean? What are you seeing cellular biology in Genesis chapter 1? I didn't get to ask him that. But now that I am studying a little bit more of what lymphatic is, and what our cells, and what, our body is at its best optimal state, I see that, yes, look at this, that there has to be, there's a division once again. There's a further division below the firmament that's happening. So what's the division? One is dry land, right? And there is the seas that are gathered in one place, which is the waters. So you see, like in other words, for and the same thing inside our bodies, the cells, they have to be kept dry. Because what happens is if there is an interruption, right? So let's say, and I think I tried to explain this with you once, Sister Yasana, the way our lymphatic system works, and there's a book, it's called The Secrets of the Lymphatic System, something like that. Okay, the way we are designed is that we are this river of living water that flows through our bodies. It's supposed to flow uninterrupted. Okay, but what happens is when we become irritated, when we become upset, no matter how lightly upset we are, even the tiniest upset, so it shocks, it introduces a shock in this highway. And when it's shocked, or an electric shock, it sometimes opens up uh, a sort of an opening into the cells, right? And what happens is when one of the I think it's called protein or something like that, when there's an opening, think of it as a pothole, right? When there is, because of the shock that happened, a hole happens, and a protein gets inserted into the dry cell, and it's not supposed to be there. What happens is the protein, and I'm going to correct it if I'm wrong, but the protein is like a magnet to the water. So the water gets sucked along with the protein. So what happens in our cells, we start to accumulate water and it's supposed to be intact, and it's supposed to be dry, right? So, and the way this researcher explained it, she said, you know, have you seen people who don't really eat a lot? You know, they don't eat a lot, and yet they are oversized. And if you and so what she's saying is, just because you're oversized, it doesn't necessarily mean that you eat a lot. A lot of it too is because of negative emotions, because of stressful conditions. And what happens is when you're allowing, you know, you're getting stressed, you're getting upset, and time to time your lymphatic system is getting a shock treatment, and you're opening up all these holes into your cells, and proteins are going in there, and it's sucking all the water, and it's not supposed to be there. So now there's an overgrowth, right? In a particular area of our body when it's supposed to be dry. Okay, so just little things like that. And if you want to know more about that, I think there's a book that called it, the book is called The Secrets of the Lymphatic System. This, I think it's the way it's written, it makes it very simple to understand. And this will teach us how we can cleanse, how we can keep our lymphatic system, no stagnation, right? Because anytime there is negative emotions, there's stagnation that happens in our lymphatic system. So, and it just interrupts everything, right? So I just want to point that out there. So verse 10, you can see that, you know, here it says, again, Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and Elohim saw that it was good. Okay, now verse 11. Then Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself and on the earth. And it was so. Someone is knocking on the door. I don't know why. Hold on a second. 1 second, sister. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of... Sorry about that. Here we go.
That's okay.
Okay, so what I wanted to point out here is grass, herb, fruit tree is coming up on the earth, and already you can see that it is, you know, it's yielding after its own kind. So already you see, and I think that is a very scientific term, you know, that yields seed after its own kind. Okay, but look at this, all of that happens on the third day, right? The earth, the land, the sea, the grass, all of this is happening on the third day. But look at this. On verse 14, this is when Elohim creates the day, or the sun and the moon, right? Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, seasons, and for days and years. Okay, let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and it was so. Then Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. Okay. So one thing that you want to point out here is this, that you want to see. The lights that Elohim made, he says, they are put in the firmament. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So these lights are in the firmament. So we know that this firmament, whatever it is, right? Something that divides water from above the firmament, that is firm, that is impenetrable unless Yahuah opens a window. It's so firm, it's so solid, it's super solid. And I don't know if you've heard of this, Sister Yusana, in one of the YouTube videos. It's called Project Fishbowl. I don't know if you want to look it up, but there was a point in history, I don't remember when, but I think this was post World War II, maybe, or World War One. I think it's World War II. That in Antarctica or in that area, right, that the government of the world, like they collaborated. I think Russia, US, there's probably a couple more countries, but they invested vast amount of resource, and they called this the Project Fishbowl. So what they did was they launched missiles, okay, that would go all the way, and they were trying to target something in the sky. Whatever it was, they can't penetrate through it. Right? It's called Project Fishbowl. It's something that, you know, that's something that you can research too. But the point is, there is a firmament. There is something there. And it says that these lights, which includes the sun, the moon, and the stars, they are in the firmament. Okay? So just we have to just, I don't know if you can imagine it, but we will try to draw it out. Okay? But so here, obviously here it says that you know, these are made to rule the day, the night, you know, the greater and the lesser light. We know that, and it was good. But my question is, how is it that the grass, the herbs, and the tree, how is it that it, you know, was growing, or it grew, it came forth from the earth when the sun was not made until day 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know now, today, we know that if the sun were to disappear, or if the sun were to do something that is outside of what its job is, it will cause havoc on earth. We need the sun to grow our plants. You know, we need, but isn't it interesting how in here, the grass, the trees, they seem to have been made before the sun, not seem, but the text says so, that they were made before the sun and moon and stars were made. So what's the point here? The point is, this is what I was saying earlier, okay? In Genesis 1 and 3, chapter 1, 2, and 3, and a lot of, you know, the first mention, we sometimes, our understanding, our presupposition, our position has been given to us, has been passed down to us, and we haven't really looked into it ourselves. You see my point? What is, and this, the way you imagine the earth right now, the way you imagine the heavens, the way you've been taught from Sunday school, from, you know, from everyone you know, that has created a belief system in yourself, which is why even now, as I'm speaking this, as I'm sharing these little things, I'm pointing it out to you. And there's a reason why I'm pointing them out to you, right? But even in that, your ears is hearing it, and you're like, yeah, I don't know. You don't know what to do with this information, right? You know, what do I do with it, right? So one thing that I want to point out, because I think it's so good for us to pause a little bit in the creation story. We're up to day 4, right? Is that the Torah, the Yahuwah's instructions are all over it already. Did you pick it up? Right? So let me rephrase what I'm saying. Yahuwah Elohim gave instructions, right? And he said, right? He said, let there be a firmament. So he gave instructions, and it was so, right? Let the waters under the heavens be gathered in one place, and let the herbs and the trees and all of these things, right? These are instructions. These are Torah instructions. And look at the creation that Yahuwah created. They oblige, they follow. So look at it this way. The sun and the moon and the stars, right? They have their own instructions, right? The reason why the sun comes up every day and the moon shines its light every night, the stars stay in their position, in their station, they're actually obeying a law. Do you see what I'm saying? Instead of instruction, right? Can you imagine if the sun said, I don't want to follow the law? The law is done away with. What would happen? What if the moon says, I'm not going to follow. I don't want to shine my light tonight, right? Like, do you see my point? These, even in the creation, they have a set of instructions that they followed in the day that they were created. And to this day, right? The trees, the herbs, the grass, they're still coming forth. The sun is coming out in one of the Psalms, it says, the sun is so, it's like a bridegroom coming out of its chamber, so excited to do what it's called to do. Somewhere in Psalms, it says that. So these Yahuwah's creation, and we're talking about these things that we've been talking about, they follow instructions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question I have is, the law that they follow, does it save them? Yeah, no, right? So do you see my point? So the law doesn't save. The law puts things in order so that there is life. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, and this is where, the whole debate, is the law done away with? The law no longer applicable. We are so far-fetched from the writers of the scripture, of the Pauline writings and the Gospels, but even in the first chapter of Genesis, already the instructions are in play. And even to this day, right? And, something happened to the creation. We know that. Because of the fall, the creation was subject to the fall. That's what Romans says. Paul says in Romans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what? The says, even the creation groaneth. Right? What does it say? I think it's in Romans. Let me see.
Yeah, it is in Romans. So yeah, waiting for
Yeah. So they're
the sons of
waiting,
God to, yeah.
right, for the redemption of the sons of Elohim, right? So in other words, even because they didn't break any Torah. They didn't. If you think about it, because of man fall, because of the fall of man, they were subjected to it. And to this very day, they cannot wait. They are groaning. They are like, oh, when are these people, when are they going to get it? Right? When are they going to get it? Right? And it's like, so we have to see that. So here in the very chapter of Genesis 1, there's already the instructions, and we know that the instructions itself do not save, right? It's meant to put things in order. And we serve an Elohim who is the Elohim of order, right? So, but a few things here, the reason why a lot of these things kind of don't make sense based on our current perspective, our current understanding, again, is because this is before the fall, right? You know, we have to see, how is it that on day 4, when the sun and the moon and the stars were made, right? Before that, there was already plants and stuff, right? But then if you track back, if you fast forward to Revelation, you're going to see something there, right? It'll say, and there's no more sun, right? In other words, there will be no need for a sun, because Yahuah and Yahushua will be the light to that kingdom, in Revelation. So my point is, I just want you to see that there's so much more here than what we have been sort of glossing over for I don't know how many years, right? And we start with a question. So the reason why these are questions, I'm just bringing them to your attention, is, you know, when we ask questions, you be prepared to embark on a quest, because a question, right, puts you on a quest. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to, and this is just in the first chapter of Genesis. And so we're going to see that after the sun and the moon and the stars were made, right? And it was good, right? And then after that, that's when, you know, the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament. So from a scientist perspective, they look at this and like, wow, this is locomotion. This is movement, right? See, that's how you constitute life, when there's movement, right? Even in plants, in the cellular makeup of a plant, there's movements, even though the plant itself is not moving, right? But here, when it comes to these living creatures, now birds, right? All of these things, and again, the same, very, you know, it's very consistent with what we know of when it comes to cell division, when it comes to genetics, right? That, you know, these creatures are to multiply and be fruitful after its own kind, right? So that's genetics, right? And so we know that on the 5th day was the living creatures in the water and the birds were made. Okay, and then on day 6, this is where it becomes a bit of an interest to me. So on day 6, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind. So now the land animals are coming up from the earth, right? And again, it's the beast of the earth, the cattle, the creeping things, after its own kind, or according to its kind. Okay, this is day 6, right? Day 6, again, on day 6, Yahuah says on verse 26, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. One thing I want to point out to your attention. This man in our image that's being made here has been given dominion over 5 kingdoms. I want you to see when you have dominion over something, you are running a kingdom, right? Again, I'm going to say it again, verse 26. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over 5 kingdoms. What are the kingdoms? Fish of the sea, birds of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So certainly, man has been given dominion to rule over all of these kingdoms. But if you look today, that's not the case, right? Man is not ruling over these things, right? But one thing that I want to point out as well is you don't see here that man has been given dominion over man. Do you see it? So here, let me rephrase that. Right now, we see that there are many man-based kingdom that rules over us. If you think about it, there's the government, right? And in the government, there's various different sections, like the municipal, the federal, the provincial. And so there are many different types of, there's the president, there's the queen, there's, institutions giving you have authority over us, right? I'm just saying, right? In the beginning, you don't see that there is a man that is supposed to have dominion over man. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, because ultimately, right, Yahuah, we serve a Yahuah of what's the word I'm looking for? Monarchy, right? Mm-hmm. He is King of Kings, right? Ruler of all, right? In the fullness thereof. Again, I'm talking about before the fall. The way we are designed is we are to have rulership over Yahuwah's creation. He gave us that. But right now we don't have that. In fact, we have subjected ourselves from many dominion of different kind of authority over us. And this is what I'm sensitive of time, but this is what I want to venture off in the next session is, what is the difference between dominion and authority? Because Yahuwah impressed that upon my heart, right? And just as a short clip, listen, dominion is something that was given to you by the Creator himself. That's why it's called minion, or like minion, Yahuwah's minion, right? You are literally his minion. You dominate, right? And the authority, like for example, if I were to be a licensed doctor, right? And I have been given the license, the right, the authority to practice medicine. But again, that's man-based, right? But because I choose to do natural things, I choose to not give, like prescriptions to my patients, and promote non-pharmacia based solutions, then I don't know how, but I've seen stories after stories where your license to practice, your authority can be taken away from you. You see? Do you see my point? There is a difference between dominion and authority. And authority is something that is typically given by someone else other than Yahuah, right? And I guess if we're talking in the fallen state that we are in, you know, if you look at it, we're all after authority. We're all after what's the word I'm looking for? A validation of man, right? Like if I want to go ahead and start a business, or not a business, but a non-for-profit or something, an outreach program that will help people with mental issues, what's the first thing that they're going to ask of me, or that they're going to look at with that goes with my name? What's my authority, my credentials, right? Did I go to school? What certification do I have? Licensing, right? But if you think about it, in the beginning, there's no such thing. Yahuah gave us dominion over the earth and everything that is in it. That's in the beginning.
But we lost it.
We've lost it, exactly. And now we get that through Yahushua, because he's our Redeemer. He is the reason why we are qualified again to enter into that, delight, into that dominion with Yahuah. But we have to see some of these things, right?
Yeah, he gave us dominion, and he gave us authority to step on serpents. And
absolutely. Do you see? You're right. And look at, I know you're quoting a scripture somewhere in Matthew, right? Something like that.
I think it's in Mark.
Okay.
In Mark 16.
You want to quote it?
It's in Mark 16. These are the traits that are going to follow the believers. They are going to even step on serpents, and if they drink anything that is poisonous, it won't hurt them. Wow. And they would drive out demons, and that's in at the end of Mark.
Right. You see, that is in Yahushua. That is the kind of authority, and that authority we get from Mashiach brings us dominion. It brings us back to the way Yahuah has designed us to be. And and this is what I wanted to see here in the first chapter of Genesis. You're going to see the way Yahuah has originally designed mankind, and how far have we fallen, right? How far have we been, even in the way our mentality works? It's so far from reading this. And so in our next meeting, I'm going to get Rish. I'm going to read it over again, just a one-liner. And then as I'm reading it, I'm going to get her to draw it. And you're going to see what could the picture look like. And this is from a child, right? And then we're going to continue on with the rest. But this is what I wanted to sort of draw back from in the promise that was promised to the overcomer, promise to the assembly in Laodicea, right? Right. And that is, the throne, the dominion. So we're going to unpack that a little bit more next session, right? But other than that,